Hello friends, it's Christy Marcotte. Today I'm sharing some cards I made using Paper Rose's Christmas Day paper collection. This is an A5 paper pack. There's 24 papers, 2 of each, and they're single-sided. And what I love about this collection is it has patriotic colors. So red, white, and blue and Christmas cards together is perfect. I don't think I've ever made a patriotic Christmas card before, but now I have. I'm just flipping through the designs real quickly so you can get an idea of what's included. Lots of fun patterns. And I won't be using any stamp sets this time. For sentiments, I'm using the Crisp Christmas sentiment sheets. So these are really fun. Lots of different Christmas sentiments. So you could fussy cut these out. You could die cut them with a circle die. And it's fun that most of the sentiments have the option of the black background or the white background. So lots and lots of sentiments included in this set. And there are 2 sheets of each design. And even within the one design, you can see there's multiples of that same sentiment. And then the final few sheets have the very small, skinny sentiments. There are a ton of sentiments included in this pack, so it will last a very long time. I will have links provided in the description box for both of the packs I use along with the other products. So let's go ahead and get started with my first set of cards. I'm using a sketch from Freshly Made Sketches. This is number 457. I will be making 2 of each card, but I'm only going to show the assembly of 1. I have this fun image paper with the blue background. There's some trees, some pine cones. I think there's some fruitcake on there. Layered that on some blue cardstock. And then for that piece that goes behind, I used some white shimmer paper. So you just see the little sliver on the right and left hand side. And then I adhered that piece onto some red, white, and blue stripe paper. Although actually I don't think there's any white. It's a very light blue. I'll layer that on the blue cardstock, put my card onto a card base. I've already cut out the sentiment. This is wishing you joy this season. I'm going to layer that on the same blue cardstock. My cardstock layers are usually an additional 1/8 of an inch to the measurements listed on the sketch. I decided to add some foam dimensional tape to the back of the sentiment, and then I'll adhere it to the front of the card. I decided to add a couple of banners in the upper left-hand corner. It just seemed a little empty up there. So I cut out one with that same blue cardstock and then another in red cardstock. I cut the red banner a little shorter than the blue. Before I adhere them to the card, I am going to add some scrap pieces of cardstock just where it goes off of the other layers. I like to keep everything at the same level. And then I'll use some liquid adhesive and attach both of the banners. And I did use a Paper Rose banner die set to cut both of these out. Since the right hand side of the red banner goes off of all those other layers, rather than cut a few more pieces of cardstock, I am using a thin foam square. It was the perfect thickness to keep it all at the same level. So just try to make sure to get it nice and straight. For embellishments on my cards, I'm using Paper Rose's Shaker Mix. This is their clear crystal mix. It goes perfectly with all of the papers since they're just clear crystals. Now they don't have adhesive on the back, so I will need to use some liquid glue. I like to lay them out on my card first, that way I can get the placement correct. And I'm using an embellishment wand to help pick up those small pieces. Then I'll add some liquid adhesive and then adhere all of the crystals to my card. And the glue does dry clear, so you're not going to see that white behind the crystal. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this sketch. Now moving on to my next set of cards. The card sketch is from MFT. This is number 494. I have this fun snowflake paper for the background, some plaid paper to go across the back of this oval. And for the oval, this is this fun watercolor looking paper. It's just in a blue print. So I'm going to layer the plaid paper on some red cardstock. I'm using some silver mirror cardstock for the very background. I'll just layer this panel on that silver, and it'll add a really lovely shine. Put my card front onto a card base. Then before I adhere the oval to the card, I am going to add those scrap pieces of cardstock to the upper and lower portion. And I just cut out a smaller oval die cut and then trimmed off the pieces. I always have a ton of scrap cardstock left over, so it was perfect to just pull out a dark blue. It's not the exact color that I'm using on here, but you're not going to see it since it's underneath. Now for the image, I'm using this fun Christmas fir tree die from Paper Rose. It has two different sizes. So I cut out the larger one with that same blue cardstock, and then the smaller one I used that silver mirror cardstock. I'm going to glue the blue one down directly using some liquid adhesive, and on the silver, I've already added some of the thin foam squares. I did have to cut them fairly small to fit behind all the little delicate pieces on the tree, so then I could pop that one up. For the sentiment, I'm using Have a Merry Little Christmas, and I'm going to layer this using that same red cardstock. I'll put some scrap pieces of cardstock on the outer edges on the right and left hand side. And I do end up doing 2 layers of cardstock, since that's what was necessary to keep it at the same level. I'll put liquid adhesive on the back and adhere that underneath the 2 trees. The blue watercolor paper was perfect for the oval, since you could feature an image and your sentiment without it getting lost on the busy designs. I did decide to add that small banner in the upper left hand corner, and I used some white shimmer paper for that. Now I'll pull out the clear crystal mix again, just trying to choose an assortment of sizes. There's some really tiny crystals in here. There's one to the right side of this silver tree. And then there's some that are fairly large. So it's really nice to have that assortment. So there is my finished card. And again, I did make 2 using this sketch. I am loving the look of the patriotic Christmas cards. And it's so fun since Paper Rose is actually an Australian company, but their flag colors are the same as the United States. And I know there's lots of other countries that also have the red, white, and blue. So moving on to my next set of cards. This sketch is from MFT. This is number 489. I'm using that plaid paper for the background. And then for those 2 thin strips on the left-hand side, I did use some dies from Paper Rose. This is their sentiment strip die set, but I decided they were perfect to cut out those thin strips. I just used some blue cardstock since all of the patterns would have been lost on this plaid paper. And I'm adhering them to the card using some liquid adhesive. They are longer than an A2 size card, but I'm just going to trim off the ends. And if I didn't mention earlier, all of my cards are A2 American size. So it's 5.5 by 4.25 inches. I layered that back panel using some red cardstock. And then for the image, I decided to layer it twice. So I have it first on some red cardstock and then on some white shimmer paper. Put that scrap piece of cardstock on the right hand side, just keeping everything level. And then I was going to put this onto the card base, but I decided to add some twine around the top portion of the card. So this is just some blue and white twine that I have on hand. It matches really nicely with the blue on the pattern paper. I put some adhesive on the back, wrapped the twine around twice, and then I'm putting some score tape on the very back just to make sure those ends don't slip off later. I put a bunch of ATG tape on the back, but I'm also going to add some liquid adhesive to the top where it's near the twine, just to make sure that card front isn't going to pull away from the card base. I notice whenever I have that extra layer of twine or something underneath, it may pull away with just the ATG tape. So I tied a bow on the left-hand side, and for the sentiment, I'm using Merry Christmas. I cut a fishtail on the right-hand side, And I've already attached a couple layers of cardstock to the left-hand side to keep it all level. Glue that directly down onto the card, and now I'm going to finish it off with just a few pieces of the clear crystals. I'll put 2 of them in the lower right-hand corner and then a small one next to the sentiment. Now with the bow and the bling, the card is a little thicker, so it may need additional postage if I choose to mail it. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this sketch. Now moving on to the next set of cards. The sketch is from Freshly Made Sketches. It's number 311. I have some red snowflake paper for the background. And for the smaller rectangle, the pattern paper has a bunch of presents and ornaments and tiny little stars. So I layered the present paper with some blue cardstock. I'm attaching the snowflake paper onto some white shimmer paper and then layering that on some red cardstock. I'll put my card front onto a card base. For this card, I decided not to have any of the white card base showing, so that background layer is an additional 1/4 of an inch versus the 1/8 of an inch I usually add for my matted layers. I used a circle die to cut out the sentiment Merry Christmas. I'm going to layer this on some silver mirror cardstock and then again on some blue mirror cardstock. I think it makes it stand out just a little bit more. Now I will add some scrap cardstock to the right hand side of the circle where it goes off of the other layers. I'm going to put 2 different pieces of cardstock. And then I'll put liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to my card. So that sentiment circle is much larger than the one indicated on the sketch. But that's what's fun about sketches. You can use them for inspiration, and then you can add your own touches or change them up as needed. I am going to add a couple of silver mirror stars to the upper left-hand corner, and I'm layering these stars. Since I'm using some silver mirror cardstock, it took just a few seconds longer for the glue to adhere them together. I thought about popping them up on a foam square, but decided to adhere them directly onto the card instead. And then I'll add some of the clear crystals, put a few of them in the lower right hand corner, and then I decided to add a small one to the center of each of the stars. Once I've decided on the placement of the crystals, I can grab my embellishment wand and some liquid adhesive and get those all adhered to the card. I like the metal tip on the back side of the embellishment wand. It helps press those crystals in place. Now since the sentiment is all in black, I wanted to add a little bit of color. So I'm using 2 different Nuvo glitter drops. I have the white blizzard, I'm adding that to the leaves, and then I have the red sunstone that I put on the little holly berries. And once it dries, the white blizzard actually has a slight green finish to it, so it worked perfectly for those leaves. So there are my 2 finished cards. Now moving on to my next set of cards, and I won't be using a card sketch this time. And this does end up being my favorite card. It's interesting because I didn't use very much pattern paper, and I love pattern paper. I have some white shimmer paper for the background. I used a stitched rectangle die to add some detail. Layered that on some red cardstock. Put my card front onto a card base. And I did use liquid adhesive to adhere that shimmer paper just to make sure it stays in place. I used Paper Rose's bird ornaments to cut out these darling little birds. It even has the little ornament hooks. And I used the red watercolor paper for the birds. So it adds a fun look to them. With the bird on the right, the belly looks white. For some extra detail, I used another one of the sentiment strips, this time with some silver mirror paper. Added that to the lower portion of the card, and that's going to anchor this sentiment. So I decided I was going to use one of the sentiments with the black background, and it worked perfectly with this card since it doesn't have any of the blue. I layered this sentiment on some red cardstock. I did add that scrap piece of cardstock to the upper part just to keep it level. And now I'm going to figure out placement for my sweet little birds. Put some liquid adhesive on the back, and then I'll glue it directly onto the card. So the bird's tail is going to go over that silver mirror strip. I'll do the same thing for the little bird on the right. So there's two different bird ornaments and then two different ornament hooks. There's one that's shorter, but I only cut out the longer one. And I will be trimming this hook down. I'm just going to put some adhesive on the back of the lower portion. And I'll adhere it to the top of the bird. I'll let the rest of it hang off for now, and then I'll trim that off here in a moment. Then I'll do the same thing for the bird on the left. So I'm going to let that glue dry for a moment. I'm going to trim off the extra of that little silver strip at the bottom. Then using an X-Acto knife, I'm going to trim off the extra ornament hook. That way it goes flush to the white paper. Finishing touch, I'm pulling out some more of the clear crystals. I'm going to sprinkle them all over the background on the card. And I did speed this part up quite a bit since it takes a while to adhere all those little crystals. But there is my finished card. Definitely my favorite. Those bird ornaments are absolutely adorable. And the birds would work year round. You could just leave off that ornament hook. So now moving on to my final set of cards, I'm using this fun die from Paper Rose. It's their comic strip frame. I've gone ahead and cut out the frame with some blue cardstock, and then I have several different pattern papers for the inside pieces. I love this style die since you can feature lots of different pattern papers. It also works great to finish off a paper pad with those small scraps. I flipped over the frame and I'm adding some score tape to the back side. This makes it really easy to inlay all of the pieces, and you don't have to deal with messy liquid adhesive. Now all of the pieces are a different size, so I did cut out most of them one at a time. There's a couple I would cut two at the same time, and I just taped the paper to the die using some washi tape. So now I'm basically just assembling a puzzle, just taking all of those pieces and adhering them into the frame. When cutting out the pieces, you do want to make sure if they're direction specific that you have them all facing the same direction. So I have all of those in place and I can adhere this onto my card base. Just going to remove the backing on the score tape. I do want to mention this is not an A2 size die. Although it's very close. It was almost 5.5 by 4 1/8. So I did trim off that extra from my card base so it would fit perfectly. For the sentiment, I used an oval die to cut out the Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, layered it on some blue cardstock. I'm going to pop this up using some foam dimensional tape. And I'll adhere it to the lower right-hand corner. When I was cutting out the pattern paper, I tried to use patterns that weren't as busy in those lower corners since I knew I was going to be covering them up with a sentiment. I'm also adding a couple of banner die cuts to the upper left-hand corner. I did end up covering a few of the houses, but you can still see most of that pattern paper. And then finishing touch, pulling out some more of those clear crystals. I love how they work perfectly with all the different patterns. I'm going to put 3 of them in the lower right-hand corner, and then I'll add 2 of them to the banners in the upper left-hand corner. And even though I haven't been showing it throughout the video, I do like to add a strip of pattern paper to the inside of the card, just for some extra detail. So there are my 2 finished cards using this fun die. Now here's a quick recap of the 12 cards I made using Paper Rose's Christmas Day paper collection. This is such a fun collection. I love the patriotic colors and all the Christmas designs. Now, I did not finish off this paper pack. I have so many Christmas videos I'm still trying to get through, and it's already December. So I thought I'd just do a sample of this paper collection. I do have links provided in the description box if you are interested in any of the products I showed in this video. The bird ornament card is my favorite, but do let me know which card is your favorite. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.